What do you do when your life is a constant battle for survival? For Aurora Templeton, 25 years old, that meant smiling through gritted teeth while serving coffee to the city's elite, all while her dreams gathered dust. But one customer was different. Carter Jason, a man whose wealth was only matched by his cruelty. His words were daggers, his gaze a judgment. Every shift he appeared was a masterclass in humiliation. What she didn't know was that this man, this monster who seemed determined to break her spirit, was tied to her by a secret forged in love and sealed by tragedy a quarter-century ago. This is not just a story about a waitress and a millionaire. It is about a wound that never healed, a truth that was buried, and the collision of two worlds that will either destroy both or reveal the incredible identity of her true father. The aroma of overcooked coffee, lemon polish, and simmering desperation was the official perfume of the Golden Spoon. It was a place that pretended to be more than it was, a mid-level bistro with five-star aspirations and clientele who believed their bank balance entitled them to behave like feudal lords. For Aurora Templeton, it was simply the place that kept the lights on in her small, drafty apartment and paid for the art supplies she rarely had energy to use. At 25, Bella felt older than her years. The light in her eyes, once vibrant, reflecting the bright, hopeful girl she had been, often dimmed by exhaustion. Her mother, Sophia, had passed away 6 months ago after a brutal fight against cancer, taking with her the warmth and the small, fragile sense of security that had defined Bella's world. Now she was truly alone, armed only with a mountain of medical debt, a half-finished graphic design portfolio, and a resilience tested daily. Her best friend and fellow waiter, Liam, slid a glass of water across the service counter. "You have table 7, he said in a low voice. "Get ready, it's him." Bella didn't need to ask who he was, Carter Jason. The name alone was enough to tense the staff's shoulders. He was an industry titan, the CEO of Jason Global Holdings, a man whose photo appeared frequently in the Financial Times, but whose personality was better captured in a horror novel. He came to the Golden Spoon twice a week for lunch, not because he liked the food. He made it painfully clear he did not, but it was conveniently located. And as Liam theorized, he enjoyed a fresh audience for his own brand of casual cruelty. "Charming," Bella murmured, tying her apron tighter as if it were armor. She put on her professional smile, the one that didn't quite reach her eyes, and picked up a menu. Carter Jason sat alone, his back straight as a rod, his tailored suit probably costing more than Bella's entire annual income. He wasn't looking at the menu, he was looking out the window. His face, a mask of severe impatience. He was handsome in a stern, sculpted way, with sharp cheekbones, piercing blue eyes, and dark hair with silver strands. But there was no softness in his features, only a chilling authority. "Good afternoon, sir. Welcome to the Golden Spoon. May I start you with something to drink?" Bella asked in an even, polite voice. He didn't look at her. His gaze remained fixed outside. "Italian sparkling water, with a single perfectly spherical ice cube and a slice of lime. Not lemon. The lime must be freshly cut. I can tell the difference if it has been exposed." His voice was not low, crisp, and devoid of any warmth. "Of course, sir," Bella said, making a mental note of the unnecessarily complex order. It was his characteristic move, an immediate test of competence in her mission. She returned moments later with the water prepared exactly as he had requested. She herself had selected the lime and cut it. She placed it on the table with a steady hand. Finally, he turned his head, his cold blue eyes sweeping over her for the first time. It was a dismissive look, the kind given to a slightly out-of-place piece of furniture. He took the glass, swirled it, and took a small sip. "Passable," he conceded, setting the glass down with a definite click. "The menu is right here, sir," Bella said, pointing to the menu she had already placed on the table. He gave a prolonged sigh of suffering, as if her mere existence were an inconvenience. "I know where it is. I am telling you to present it to me." It was a power game, pure and simple. Bella held her position, her smile tightening. "Our special today is a pan-seared salmon with asparagus risotto and a creamy dill sauce." "I don't care for your special," he scoffed, finally picking up the menu. He scanned it for less than 10 seconds before slamming it shut. "The steak, medium rare. And when I say medium rare, I don't mean the chef's interpretation. I want a warm red center. If it comes out even one shade towards medium, I will return it. The fries must be crispy, not limp with oil. And I want the seasonal vegetables, but no carrots. I detest carrots." Medium rare steak, crispy fries, seasonal vegetables without carrots. Excellent choice, sir. Bella said the words, tasting like ash in her mouth. She retreated to the ordering system, her hands trembling slightly as she entered the order. Liam approached from behind. He's in a rare form today. Did he ask you to personally pluck the chicken yet? Almost, Bella sighed, leaning against the counter. He specified the geometry of his ice cube. Liam shook his head. The man is a sociopath in a suit. Don't let him get to you. I'm trying, she whispered. But some days it feels personal, like he looks at me and sees everything he despises. He looks at everyone like that, Bella. It's not you, it's him. But Liam was wrong. It felt personal. It was the way his eyes, the color of a winter sky, seemed to look directly through her, dismissing her entire being as useless. It unearthed ancient insecurities, the feeling of not being good enough that had haunted her since childhood, a ghost she could never quite shake. Her mother had always been there to banish those ghosts, to tell her she was smart and talented and worthy. Without Sophia, the ghosts felt more real, and Carter Jason was their king. The food was ready. Bella personally inspected the steak, pressing the center lightly. It felt right. The fries were golden, the vegetables glistened. She carried the heavy plate to his table. Your steak, sir, she announced, placing it in front of him. He didn't thank her. He took his knife and fork and cut precisely into the center of the meat. He leaned in, inspecting it like a jeweler examining a flawed diamond. He took a single bite, chewing slowly, his expression unreadable. Bella held her breath. It's acceptable, he finally declared. Then he picked up a green bean from his plate with his fingers, held it up, and looked at her. This is overcooked. Its structural integrity has been compromised. Bella looked at the green bean, then back at his deadly serious face. For a moment she thought it was a joke, a bizarre attempt at humor, but his eyes were cold, expectant. He was serious. I'm so sorry, sir, she said, her training kicking in. Would you like me to bring you a new side of vegetables? Don't be ridiculous. The moment has passed, he said, waving a dismissive hand. Just make sure it doesn't happen again. One expects a certain standard, even in a place like this. He ate the rest of his meal in silence, never looking up once. Bella avoided the table, sending Liam to refill his water. The man's pure arrogance radiated from him like a toxic aura, poisoning the air around him. When he finally finished, he stacked his plates neatly, a sign she knew he was ready for the bill. She left it without a word. He placed a black credit card on top. When she brought back the receipt for him to sign, he took his time, his expensive fountain pen scratching against the paper. He pushed it to the edge of the table and stood up, adjusting his suit jacket. He left the restaurant without a backward glance. Bella walked towards the table, a sense of dread washing over her. His tips were notoriously insulting. $1, sometimes just loose change. It was another way to remind her of her station. She took the receipt. The total amount was exactly $87.50. On the tip line, he had written a single bold number, 0, and underneath, in sharp, angular handwriting, were 4 words. Try a little harder. The ink seemed to burn on the page. It wasn't just a 0 tip. It was a personal critique, a calculated blow. All her effort, her patience, her swallowing pride for nothing, for a slap in the face. A hot tear of fury and humiliation stung her eye. She quickly wiped it away, crumpling the receipt in her fist. Don't look, Liam said gently, coming to clear the dishes. Just throw it away. It's not worth the paper it's written on. Bella unclenched her fist and smoothed the paper. She looked at the sharp, elegant handwriting, the cruel words. One day, she whispered to herself, a vow forming in the broken parts of her heart. I will be somewhere he cannot reach me. I will be someone he cannot dismiss. She didn't know then how prophetic those words would be, or how spectacularly, terribly wrong she was. Carter Jason was already closer to her than she could ever imagine. The encounters with Carter Jason became a somber ritual. Every Tuesday and Thursday he appeared like a storm cloud, in a tailored suit, and the air at the Golden Spoon grew heavy. He never varied his order, but always found a new flaw. The soup was a degree too warm. The bread wasn't crispy enough. The music was distracting. Each complaint was delivered with the same detached superiority, a surgeon dissecting a corpse. Bella learned to cope by dissociating. She became a machine, a courteous automaton that delivered food and absorbed insults without reaction. But behind the professional facade, a slow-burning anger solidified into something harder, something that felt dangerously like hatred. One rainy Thursday was particularly vile. The restaurant was busy, and the kitchen was behind. Your steak took 3 minutes longer than usual. Is the cow being slaughtered on request? he asked flatly when she apologized for the delay. When the food arrived, he claimed the fries were cold, though steam visibly rose from them. He sent them back. When the fresh batch arrived, he ate 2 and left the rest, declaring his appetite ruined. He left no tip, but this time the note on the receipt read, "Perhaps a career requiring less precision would be more suitable." That night, Bella walked home in the drizzle, the cruel words echoing in her head. They hurt more than the others because they struck where she was most vulnerable. Her stagnant ambition, her dream of being a graphic designer felt more distant than ever. She spent her days serving people like him and her nights too exhausted to even open her sketchbook. His words weren't just an insult, they felt like a verdict on her life. She let herself into her small apartment, the one she had shared with her mother. It still faintly smelled of Sophia's favorite brand of soap. Most of her mother's belongings had been sorted, given to charity, or packed into storage. But one thing remained, sitting on the dusty top shelf of the hallway closet, a large, sturdy shoebox sealed with yellowed tape. Sophia had called it her ghost box. It contained mementos from her life before Bella, a life she rarely spoke of. "Some things are better left in the past," Sophia would say with a sad smile, whenever a young Bella asked about it. She had made Bella promise not to open it until she was truly ready to understand. Bella hadn't known what that meant. After her mother died, she couldn't bring herself to touch it. The grief was too raw. But tonight was different. Ellison's relentless cruelty had emptied her, leaving her feeling disconnected from herself, from the person her mother had raised her to be. She needed a reminder of where she came from. She needed a piece of her mom. With a resolve she hadn't felt in months, she dragged a chair into the hallway, climbed up, and carefully lifted the box. It was heavier than expected. She sat on the floor, her heart thrumming a nervous rhythm against her ribs, and cut the tape with a kitchen knife. The scent of old paper and dried flowers wafted out. On top lay a stack of old vinyl records, mostly Italian singers Sophia had loved. Beneath them, wrapped in tissue paper, were the true treasures. First, a small velvet-covered diary. Bella opened it. It was her mother's journal, from when she was in her early 20s, just after arriving in America from Italy. The entries were filled with hope, excitement, and the challenges of starting a new life. Then she saw the photographs, packets of them tied with faded ribbon. There were photos of a young, radiant Sophia, her dark hair long and wild, laughing on a beach, posing in front of city landmarks. She looked so carefree, so full of life, it hurt to see. In one packet, a man was with her. He was young, probably the same age as Sophia, with an intense, ambitious look in his eyes. He wasn't conventionally handsome, but he was striking with a sharp jawline and deep-set eyes that seemed to burn with purpose. In some photos, he and Sophia laughed with arms around each other. In others, they gazed at each other with a painful tenderness that leaped from the glossy paper. Bella's breath hitched. She felt a strange pang of something. Recognition. She had never seen this man before. Her mother had never mentioned a serious boyfriend from her past. Who was he? She kept digging. At the very bottom of the box, wrapped in a silk scarf, was a small, heavy object. It was a locket, silver tarnished with age into the shape of a perfect circle. On the front, 2 initials were intricately engraved, intertwined with each other, S and A. With trembling fingers, Bella opened it. Inside were 2 tiny, perfectly preserved photographs. On one side was her mother, Sophia, looking impossibly young and in love. On the other side was the young man from the photographs. His expression in the tiny portrait was softer, a rare small smile playing on his lips. Bella stared at the man's face, her mind racing. A, the initial, on the locket. His name must start with A. She looked more closely at the face in the photo, the sharp cheekbones, the intense eyes, the lining of his jaw. A cold, horrifying familiarity began to crawl up her spine. It was impossible. It had to be a coincidence, a cruel trick of the mind. She rushed back to the stack of photographs, her hands shaking so much she could barely hold them. She found the clearest photo of the young man's face and held it under the lamplight. She studied the shape of his eyes, his nose, the line of his mouth. Then she pulled out her phone and with a sense of sickening dread typed Carter Jason Young into the search bar. The results loaded. An old business magazine article popped up titled Carter Jason, The Making of a Magnate. It featured a black and white photo of him from 30 years ago, accepting some kind of entrepreneurial award. He was older than in her mother's photos, his hair shorter, a suit replacing casual clothes, but it was unmistakably him. The same piercing eyes, the same jawline, the same man. The phone slipped from her fingers and clattered to the floor. Bella stared at the locket in her palm. S and A, Sophia and Carter. The air left her lungs. The room began to spin. Carter Jason, the cruel, arrogant millionaire who treated her like dirt, the man whose casual insults had haunted her for months, the man she hated with every fiber of her being. She grabbed for the diary, her mind a chaotic storm of denial and horror. She flipped through the pages, her eyes scanning the elegant, looping script for a name. And there it was. October 12th. Carter gave me a locket today. It's the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. He said the S and A stand for Sophia and Carter. Always. I feel like my heart could burst. He talks about his plans, his company, the Jason something or other. He says one day he'll be on top of the world, and he wants me there with him. I believe him. I would follow him anywhere. Bella's blood ran cold. It wasn't a coincidence. It was a fact. A terrible, world-shattering fact. This man, her personal tormentor, had loved her mother. Her mother had loved him. Questions came in a flood, each more painful than the last. What happened? Why did they separate? And the most terrifying question of all, the one now screaming in her mind, refusing to be silenced, did he know about her? Was Carter Jason, the monster at table 7, her biological father? She felt a wave of nausea so profound she had to lean against the wall. She looked from the loving face of the young man in the locket to the cruel, dismissive face she saw twice a week. They were the same person. How could they be? She sank to the floor, surrounded by the ghosts of her mother's past. The hatred she felt for Carter Jason was now entangled with a dizzying, sickening cocktail of confusion, betrayal, and a deep, aching grief for a history she never knew. Her life, which had felt small and difficult, had just fractured into a million incomprehensible pieces, and at the center of it all was the face of the man she had to serve in the morning. Sleep offered no escape. Bella's dreams were a feverish collage of images. Her mother's smiling face melding into Carter Jason's cold sneer, the engraved locket growing heavy in her hand, pulling her into darkness, the sound of his voice saying, "Try a little harder." Over and over, she woke feeling as if she'd been hit by a truck, the harsh reality of her discovery settling into her bones like a permanent chill. He was her father. The words felt alien, impossible. A father was supposed to be a source of protection, of love, of identity. Carter Jason was a source of humiliation and anxiety. The chasm between the man in Sophia's diary, the passionate, ambitious A who promised her the world, and the unfeeling magnate who critiqued her service, was too vast to comprehend. Her first instinct was to run away, quit her job, pack her bags, and disappear, let him sit at table 7 and torture someone else. But where would she go? Her financial situation was razor thin. Quitting without another job lined up was a luxury she couldn't afford. So she did the only thing she could. She went to work. The walk to the Golden Spoon felt different. The city streets, the familiar faces, her own reflection in the store windows. Everything seemed alien. She was no longer just Aurora Templeton, struggling waitress. She was Aurora Templeton, the unknown secret daughter of Carter Jason. The thought was so absurd it bordered on hysterical. When she walked into the restaurant, Liam greeted her with his usual cheerful smile. "Hey, you look like you've seen a ghost." "Worse," she mumbled, tying her apron. It felt like a disguise, a mask. "I think I'm living with one." She couldn't tell him. The secret was too new, too monstrous. It felt like a fragile, throbbing wound. To speak it aloud would be to make it irrevocably real. For the first few hours, she moved through her shift in a daze. She refilled coffee cups, took orders, and cleared plates, but her mind was elsewhere, sifting through the box's contents. She had stayed awake half the night reading her mother's diary. The entries painted a vivid, heartbreaking picture. Sophia and Carter had met at a university library where she shelved books part-time. He was a business student consumed by his vision of a future empire. He was brilliant, driven, and back then utterly captivated by Sophia's warmth and spirit. He called her his anchor, the one who kept him grounded. But as his ambitions grew, a shadow fell over their romance. His focus shifted from them to him. The diary entries became tinged with sadness. March 4th, Carter was supposed to meet my friends tonight. He canceled at the last minute for a networking event. He said, "These people matter, Sophia. This is the foundation." I wanted to ask him, "Don't I matter?" But I didn't. May 21st, we had a fight, a bad one. I said he was becoming cold, that his company was the only thing he truly loved. He told me I didn't understand the pressure he was under, that I was being sentimental. He didn't look at me when he said it. He looked at his business plan spread out on the table. The final entry about him was raw and painful. June 15th. It's over. He said he needed to be ruthless to succeed, and that meant no distractions. He said he loved me, but love was a luxury he couldn't afford. Now he's moving across the country to launch his first big venture. He didn't ask me to come. He didn't even leave the door open. He just left. He chose his dream over me. There was no mention of a pregnancy. Bella checked the dates. The breakup was in June. Her birthday was the following February. The timeline was undeniable. Sophia must have discovered she was pregnant after he had already left and chosen to raise her daughter alone, never telling the man who broke her heart that he was a father. A wave of fierce, protective love for her mother washed over Bella. She imagined Sophia, young and alone, in a foreign country, choosing to face pregnancy and single motherhood rather than go back to a man who had called her a distraction. Her mother had protected her from him, from his coldness, from his ambition. She had given Bella a life full of love, though also full of struggle. The bell above the restaurant door chimed, and Bella's head snapped up. Carter Jason walked in. Her heart hammered against her ribs. He was no longer just a rude customer. He was him, her father, the man who had abandoned her mother. He took his seat at table 7, and one of the new hostesses, unaware of the unspoken rule, assigned the table to Bella. It was her section. There was no escape. Liam caught her eye, his expression sympathetic. "Want me to take it?" he mouthed. Bella shook her head. A strange, defiant resolve settled over her. She had to do this. She had to face him, armed with this terrible new knowledge. She walked to his table, her legs feeling unsteady. This time, she wasn't seeing just a wealthy bully. She was seeing the man from the photographs. She searched his face for any trace of the young man her mother had loved. The piercing blue eyes were the same, but the light in them was gone, replaced by a glacial hardness. The sharp jawline was still there, but it was now set in a permanent mask of disapproval. "Good afternoon, sir," she said. Her voice was steady, but it cost her every ounce of control. He looked up, and for the first time, his eyes met and held hers for a fraction of a second longer than usual. Did he see something? A flicker of recognition? A ghost of Sophia in her features? No. His expression remained unchanged, cold, imperious. "The usual," he said, already dismissing her to look out the window. As Bella walked away, she felt a profound sense of emptiness. She had half expected, or perhaps feared, some kind of sign, some spark of connection. There was nothing for him. She was still just the waitress, a faceless cog in the machinery of his day. The knowledge changed everything about the interaction. Every demand he made, every sigh of impatience was no longer just the rudeness of a stranger. It was the neglect of a father. His complaint that her water wasn't cold enough felt like a personal rejection on a cosmic scale. When she brought him his steak, her hand trembled. As she placed the plate down, her thumb brushed the warm ceramic rim. He recoiled slightly. "Please be careful." His voice was sharp with annoyance. "I don't particularly want your fingerprints on my plate." The words hit her with the force of a physical blow. Her fingerprints, the fingerprints of his own daughter. Something inside Bella snapped. The careful facade of the professional waitress cracked. She didn't lash out, she didn't cry. Instead, a chilling coldness settled over her, mirroring his own. She looked him directly in the eyes. Her own hazel eyes, so much like her mother's, were flat and hard. "My apologies, sir," she said, her voice devoid of its usual forced warmth. It was clipped, professional, but utterly hollow. She turned and walked away without another word. For the rest of his meal, she was a ghost. She did her job with glacial efficiency, but offered no smiles or pleasantries. She refilled his water from a distance, cleared his plates in silence. She was a presence, but she no longer tried to please him. Carter noticed the change. He could feel her eyes on her as she moved about the dining room. His brow was furrowed in a slight frown. He was used to her trying, to her placating him. This new, defiant coldness was something different. It was something he wasn't controlling. It piqued his interest like a malfunctioning gear in a machine he expected to run perfectly. When he finished, she laid the bill on his table without a word. As he prepared to sign, he looked up at her one last time, a question in his cold blue eyes. Bella held his gaze and kept her expression unreadable. For a moment, they were just two people locked in a silent battle of wills, the vast, unsaid history hanging between them like a glass curtain. Then he looked away, signed the receipt, and left. Bella walked to the table, her heart a cold, heavy stone in her chest. She already knew she would find a 0 on the tip line, but this time she didn't care about the money. She was looking for the note. There was one, in the same sharp, angular handwriting. An improvement. Silence is golden. Bella did not crumple the receipt. She folded it neatly and put it in her apron pocket. It was evidence, another piece of the puzzle of who this man was. He preferred her to be silent and invisible. He had no idea how much of his own history he was attempting to erase. The next few weeks were a strange, tense dance. Bella continued her cold, efficient service, and Carter continued to watch her with a mixture of annoyance and curiosity. The dynamic had shifted. She no longer felt like a cowering victim before him. Armed with her secret, she felt powerful in a tragic way. She knew who he was, while he remained blissfully, cruelly ignorant. The knowledge was a shield. Her life outside the restaurant, however, was unraveling. The emotional toll of her discovery was immense. She spent her nights staring at the locket, her mother's diary, trying to reconcile the two Carters. Her graphic design work remained untouched. Her grief for her mother was now complicated by a fresh anger towards the man who had caused her so much pain. Liam knew something was deeply wrong. "Bella, you have to talk to me," he pleaded one afternoon after a shift. "You're like a walking shadow." "It's Jason. He did something." "He's always doing something," she deflected, unable to share the impossible truth. "I'm just tired of it." The breaking point came one Tuesday in late fall. The restaurant was unusually quiet. A young waiter, a nervous kid named Tom, who was only on his third shift, was assigned to the section next to Bella's. By a stroke of bad luck, a large group canceled, and the manager reassigned Carter Jason to Tom's section. Bella watched with a sense of impending doom as Tom, trembling slightly, approached the table. She could hear Jason's clipped, demanding tone from across the room. He watched Tom's shoulders slump as he scurried back and forth, desperately trying to meet the impossible standards. The final blow was the soup. Jason had ordered the butternut squash soup, a daily special. Tom delivered it, his hands trembling so much that a tiny drop splattered onto the saucer. Jason stared at the droplet as if it were a venomous insect. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. His quiet, clipped tone was far more effective. "Tell me, young man," he said loud enough for the few nearby tables to hear. "Is this your first time in a service environment, or are you simply naturally incompetent?" Tom turned beet red. "Oh, I'm so sorry, sir. Can I get you a new one?" "A new one?" Jason scoffed, pushing the bowl away. The entire experience is now tainted by this carelessness. It speaks of a lack of care, a lack of focus. If you cannot be trusted to carry a simple bowl of soup, how can you be trusted with anything of consequence? Tom looked on the verge of tears. "I'm sorry, sir," he stammered again, his voice cracking. The manager, Mr. Henderson, rushed over, his face a mask of panicked apology. "Mr. Jason, my deepest apologies. Tom is new. It won't happen again." Jason looked from Thomas's humiliated face to Henderson's pleading one. "Ensure that it does not," he said coldly. Then he added, "In fact, I do not wish to see him again. His presence offends my sense of order." It was an execution, a quiet, brutal command. Mr. Henderson, terrified of losing a wealthy, albeit horrible client, simply nodded. "Tom," he said, turning to the boy, "my office now." And that was it. A young boy's livelihood destroyed by a drop of soup. Something in Bella, something that had been simmering for weeks, boiled over. The shield of her cold detachment shattered, replaced by white-hot rage. It wasn't just for Tom, it was for her mother, left behind for being a distraction. It was for her own life of struggle while this man sat on a throne of wealth built on the backs of people he deemed insignificant. It was for the thoughtless cruelty of a man who had no idea of the damage he inflicted, no idea that the waitress staring at him was his own flesh and blood. She untied her apron and dropped it on a nearby service station. She walked directly to table 7. Mr. Henderson saw her coming. "Miss Templeton, what are you doing?" he hissed. Bella ignored him. She stood in front of Carter Jason, her hands clenched into fists at her sides. He looked up, a flicker of surprise in his eyes. "Is there a problem?" he asked, his voice dripping with condescension. "Yes," Bella said, her voice trembling, but clear and strong. "There is." Carter raised an eyebrow, the corner of his mouth twitched. He was almost amused. "I beg your pardon." "You sit here day after day in your expensive suit, passing judgment on people who work harder in an hour than you probably have in your entire life," she began, her voice gaining strength. "You tear people down for sport. You just cost a kid his job because you have a pathological need to feel powerful. Does it make you feel big, Mr. Jason? Humiliating people who are just trying to survive fills some kind of black hole in your soul?" A silence had fallen over the dining room. Mr. Henderson looked on the verge of a heart attack. Liam watched open-mouthed from across the room. Carter's amusement vanished, replaced by a dangerous calm. "I believe you're forgetting your place, young lady." "No," Bella shot back, taking another step closer. "I think you've forgotten yours. You're just a man, a sad, lonely man who has to buy his sense of self-worth by belittling others. My mother taught me that a person's worth isn't measured by their bank account. It's measured by their kindness, their compassion. By that measure, you are the poorest man I have ever met." The mention of her mother hung in the air, charged with meaning only she understood. She saw a flicker of something in his eyes, not recognition, but confusion. The reference was too specific, too personal. It didn't fit the script of an insolent waitress. He rose to his full height, towering over her. But for the first time, Bella didn't feel small. She felt righteous. "You're fired," he said, his voice a low growl directed at Henderson, but his eyes locked on Bella. "You can't fire me," Bella said with a bitter laugh. "I quit." She turned without looking at Henderson's apoplectic face or Liam's stunned one. She strode directly to the staff room, grabbed her worn coat and her bag, which contained her sketchbook and her dreams. She walked out the back door into the alley, past the dumpsters and discarded kitchen waste. And she didn't look back. She was unemployed. She was terrified. But as the crisp autumn air hit her face, she felt a profound sense of liberation. She had finally spoken. She had faced him not as a waitress, but as a person, as Sophia Templeton's daughter. She had no idea that her defiant final words had planted a seed of doubt in Carter Jason's mind, a seed that was about to grow into a truth that would shatter his carefully constructed world. Carter Jason returned to his silent penthouse that afternoon, feeling unsettled. The girl's outburst was an anomaly, a disruption to the predictable order of his world. Employees and service staff were supposed to be invisible, or at least placidly obedient. He had been challenged, insulted, and reprimanded in public by a common waitress. It was infuriating. Yet it was more than just anger. Her words echoed in the vast emptiness of his apartment. A sad, lonely man. The poorest man I have ever met. And the strangest part, my mother taught me. Why would she bring her mother into it? It was an oddly intimate detail in an otherwise professional confrontation. In her eyes, there was a fire in them. He hadn't expected a defiant strength that was both infuriating and strangely familiar. He sat in his leather armchair, a glass of scotch untouched on the table beside him, and found he couldn't get her face out of his mind. The incident had left a crack in his composure. The next morning, his formidable executive assistant, Evelyn, walked into his office with his daily schedule. Evelyn was a sharp, efficient woman in her 50s who had been with him for over a decade and was one of the few people who could tolerate his temper. "Good morning, Mr. Jason," she said, her tone crisp. "Evelyn," he began, foregoing his usual morning briefing, "I need you to find someone for me." She paused, tablet in hand. "A business acquisition?" "No," he said, turning to look at the sprawling city below. "A person, a waitress. She worked at a restaurant called the Golden Spoon." Evelyn's professional mask didn't slip, but he saw a flicker of surprise in her eyes. "A waitress? Sir, may I ask the nature of this inquiry?" "She was insubordinate. I had her fired yesterday. I want to know who she is," he said, the excuse sounding weak even to his own ears. He didn't just want to know who she was. He needed to. The girl was a loose thread, and he couldn't tolerate loose threads. "Her name?" Evelyn asked. He hesitated. He had never bothered to learn it. "I don't know. Young woman in her 20s, dark hair, hazel eyes, fiery." Evelyn made a note. "I will contact the restaurant management. It shouldn't be difficult." A few hours later, Evelyn returned. She stood silently before his desk, her expression carefully neutral. "Well?" he prompted, irritated by her silence. "I have the information, sir," she said. "The waitress's name is Aurora Templeton." Carter froze. The name hit him like a physical blow. Templeton was a common Italian name, but it was her name, Sophia's, a name he hadn't heard spoken aloud in 25 years, a name he had buried under decades of work, wealth, and deliberate forgetting. His heart began to pound in his chest, a frantic rhythm. "Evelyn, what else?" he asked, his voice strained. Evelyn seemed to sense the shift in atmosphere. "She is 25 years old, no immediate family alive. Her mother, Sophia Templeton, passed away earlier this year from cancer. The world tilted on its axis. Sophia Templeton passed away. The two pieces of information crashed into him. Sophia was gone, and she had a daughter, a 25-year-old daughter named Aurora. He did the math in his head, his brilliant mind suddenly slow and clumsy. 25 years ago. It was the year he had left, the year he told Sophia that love was a luxury he couldn't afford. "Sir?" Evelyn asked with a rare note of concern in her voice. "Mr. Jason, are you all right?" "You're very pale." He couldn't breathe. The waitress Aurora, her defiant eyes, the mention of her mother. It wasn't a coincidence. It was a confrontation he didn't even know was happening. "My mother taught me that a person's worth isn't measured by their bank account." It was Sophia's voice coming out of her daughter's mouth. He was her father. The girl he had tormented, insulted, and fired from her job was his own daughter. The enormity of it was suffocating. The guilt was a physical thing, a crushing weight on his chest. All these years he had lived in ignorance, building his empire while Sophia raised their child alone, struggling. And then, at the end of her life, he had inadvertently stumbled back into her world, not as a long-lost father, but as a villain. "Get me her address," he commanded, his voice ragged. "Sir, I'm not sure that's advisable." Evelyn stammered, her composure completely breaking. Evelyn, shaken, quickly found the information. Meanwhile, Bella was in her apartment surrounded by packing boxes. She had called Liam and told him everything, the box, the diary, the fact that Jason was her father. He had listened in stunned silence before rushing over, bringing pizza and a fierce protective loyalty that made her cry with relief. "So what now?" he asked, sitting on the floor amidst the clutter. "I don't know," she admitted, her voice small. "I have enough saved for about 2 months' rent. I need to find a job, any job, and I need to finish my portfolio." She looked at the locket, which she now wore under her shirt. "I just need to figure out who I am now." A sharp, authoritative knock on the door made them both jump. "Are you expecting someone?" Liam asked. Bella shook her head. She wasn't. She looked through the peephole, and her blood ran cold. Carter Jason was in the dim hallway of her apartment building, looking utterly out of place in his perfect suit. He looked older, more fragile than at the restaurant. He looked lost. "Bella? Who is it?" Liam called. "It's him," she whispered, her voice trembling. "He's here." She stumbled back from the door as he knocked again, harder this time. "Aurora. Aurora Templeton, please, I need to speak with you." His voice was different. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a raw, pleading urgency. Liam stood up, ready to play bouncer. "Do you want me to get rid of him?" Bella hesitated. Her mind screamed to say yes, to tell him to go away and never come back. But her heart was a confusing, treacherous thing. This was her father. This was the moment of truth, crashing into her life with all the subtlety of a wrecking ball. "No," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "Let him in." She opened the door. Carter Jason stood there, his blue eyes filled with a storm of emotions she couldn't decipher. Guilt, regret, desperation. He looked at her, truly looked at her for the first time. He wasn't looking at a waitress. He was searching for a ghost. He was looking for Sophia. "You have her eyes," he breathed, the words heavy with 25 years of regret. The dam inside Bella broke. The anger, the grief, the confusion, it all came pouring out. "My eyes," she said, her voice thick with unshed tears. "I also have her strength, the strength to survive without you, the strength she had when you left her because she was a distraction." He winced, as if she had struck him. "I didn't know," he said, his voice ragged. "Sophia never told me. I swear to you, I never knew you existed." "Would it have mattered?" Bella shot back, the pain of a lifetime in her question. "Or would I have been another distraction from your grand ambition?" "Yes," he said, his voice cracking with emotion. "God, yes, it would have mattered. It would have changed everything." He took a hesitant step into her apartment, his gaze falling on the open box on the floor, the diary, the photos. His eyes landed on the locket hanging around her neck. He reached into his own pocket and pulled out a worn leather wallet. From a hidden compartment, he produced a small object. It was a circle of tarnished silver, identical to hers, his half of the set. He had kept it all these years. The sight of it, more than any words he could say, undid her. It was tangible proof of the connection, of the love story that had created her. "She told me you were gone," Bella whispered, the anger draining away, leaving only a vast, aching sadness. She never said a bad word about you. She just erased you to protect me. I think she was protecting you from me, Carter said, his gaze filled with self-loathing. And she was right, for the man I became. The man who sat in that restaurant. He couldn't finish the sentence. He looked around her small, humble apartment, the evidence of a life lived without him, without his help, without his love. What I did to you, what I said, Aurora, there are no words to express how sorry I am. The apology hung in the air, heavy and insufficient, but utterly sincere. Bella didn't know what to say. There was no manual for this, no guide for when your tormentor is revealed as your father standing in your living room, broken and pleading for a forgiveness he didn't deserve, but desperately needed. I think you should go, she said finally, her voice flat with exhaustion. He looked crushed, but nodded. I understand. He paused at the door. Aurora, your mother, Sophia, was the best part of my life, and I threw it away. I've regretted it every day since. He turned and left, the sound of his footsteps echoing down the hall until only silence remained. Bella sank to the floor, the tears she had been holding back for weeks finally falling. Liam put a comforting arm around her. It wasn't a happy ending. It wasn't a reunion. It was a beginning, but the beginning of what? She had no idea. It was just the exposed nerve of two lives finally exposed. The silence left in Carter's wake was heavy and profound. He didn't call or reappear. Their first contact was a simple envelope, hand-delivered a week later. Inside, a letter written in his sharp, familiar script offered no excuses, only raw accountability. Aurora, it read, the word sorry is my poor English for the pain I caused. I cannot undo the past. I only hope that one day you will allow me the opportunity to begin trying to earn your forgiveness. In my research, I found a review of a gallery exhibition from 26 years ago. Your mother's name is mentioned. She was a painter too, a brilliant one. Tucked behind the letter was a faded newspaper clipping, praising the vibrant work of an exciting newcomer, Sophia Templeton. Bella stared at it, tears blurring the words. Her mother had packed away her own artistic dreams. This small piece of her past was a gift only Carter could have given, not an apology, but an offering. It was the first stone in a fragile bridge. A few weeks later, another package arrived, containing a professional graphic tablet. The note was brief. Talent should not be hindered by tools. This is not a gift. It is an investment in an artist I believe in. He was seeing her not just as her mother's ghost. He was investing in her future. With a mixture of trepidation and curiosity, Bella agreed to meet him on neutral ground, a bench in the city's botanical garden. He arrived not in a suit, but in simple casual clothes, looking older and weathered by a regret that seemed to have settled deep into his bones. They didn't rehash the pain of the past. Instead, he asked about her art and her dreams. He shared stories of the passionate young woman he had loved, and she shared memories of the steadfast mother who had raised her. In that quiet garden, they began to piece together a more complete picture of Sophia. For the first time, they were not a millionaire and a waitress, but two people connected by a shared, profound grief. In the months that followed, Bella threw herself into her portfolio and earned a junior designer position at a small agency, a victory that was entirely her own. Carter began to make amends in his own way, quietly starting a charitable foundation in Sophia's name to support young female artists. Their relationship remained a work in progress, built not on grand declarations but on quiet, small moments, a shared coffee, a walk through a museum, a respectful phone call. It wasn't the relationship Bella could ever have imagined, but it was real. They were two strangers bound by blood and tragedy, taking the first tentative steps on a long road towards each other, creating a fragile but hopeful new beginning. And so, a story that began with cruelty and humiliation in a noisy restaurant finds its fragile peace in the quietude of a city garden. Bella and Carter's journey is a powerful reminder that our lives are not defined by the secrets we keep, but by what we do once those secrets are brought to light. It proves that redemption is not a single act, but a long, difficult road of trying to be better day by day. Their story is far from over, but for the first time, it's a story they are beginning to write together. If this story of heartbreak, discovery, and the incredible power of forgiveness touched your heart, please let us know by hitting that like button. Share this video with someone who loves a story about the unbreakable bonds of family. And most importantly, subscribe to our channel Stories of Black Women and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next real-life drama. What would you have done in Bella's shoes? Let us know in the comments below.